Tonight, one question is dominating military planning rooms, energy markets, and diplomatic channels across the world. Has the Strait of Hormuz become the most dangerous stretch of water on Earth once again? Over the last several days, events in the Gulf have moved at a pace few analysts expected. Reports of renewed military exchanges, threats against shipping, and growing concerns about regional escalation have placed the United States military on a heightened state of readiness. Oil prices have reacted, regional governments have reacted, and military planners are now watching every movement in and around the Strait of Hormuz. But what exactly happened? And more importantly, why does it matter far beyond the Middle East? Because what we're witnessing is not simply another headline. It could become the beginning of a much larger strategic confrontation. Let's start with the move that has everyone paying attention. Iran has once again signaled its willingness to challenge activity in and around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important maritime choke points in the world. Reports indicate that tensions have intensified following renewed military exchanges between American and Iranian forces. Now, here's the first question. Why is the Strait of Hormuz so important? The answer is simple. Because an enormous percentage of global energy shipments pass through this narrow waterway. When instability appears there, the effects are felt everywhere. Oil traders react, governments react, military commanders react. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. Within hours of the latest developments, energy markets showed immediate concern as oil prices moved sharply higher amid fears of disruption. But rising oil prices are only part of the story. The bigger issue is military signaling. Every move in the strait sends a message. Every patrol sends a message. Every deployment sends a message. And every strike sends an even bigger message. Now here's another question. If both sides understand the risks, why are tensions still increasing? Because neither side wants to appear weak. The United States wants to maintain freedom of navigation and regional deterrence. Iran wants to demonstrate that it still possesses leverage in one of the world's most strategically important waterways. Those competing objectives create a dangerous environment where even small incidents can have enormous consequences. Military planners often worry less about deliberate escalation and more about miscalculation. History shows that conflicts frequently expand because one side misreads the intentions of the other. That possibility is exactly why analysts are paying such close attention to current events. Now let's look at the military dimension. When reports emerged of renewed exchanges involving US and Iranian forces, American commanders immediately had to evaluate several questions. Were the incidents isolated? Were they coordinated? Were they intended as a warning? Or were they part of a larger strategy? The answers to those questions determine everything that follows, because military responses are not based solely on what happened. They are based on what commanders believe may happen next. That distinction is critical. A single incident can be contained. A pattern of incidents suggests something entirely different. And that's why intelligence collection becomes so important during moments like these. Now here's another question. What is the US military watching most closely right now? The answer is situational awareness. Military forces want to understand who is moving, where they are moving, and why they are moving. That requires surveillance. It requires intelligence gathering. It requires continuous monitoring of activity across land, sea, and air domains. In modern warfare, information is often as valuable as firepower. The side that understands the battlefield most clearly usually possesses a major advantage. That reality explains why surveillance systems, radar networks, communications infrastructure, and intelligence assets are considered so important. Military planners know that without information, decision-making becomes slower and less effective. And in a fast-moving crisis, delays can become extremely costly. Now let's shift to the political dimension. Political leaders face a different challenge. Military commanders focus on operational objectives. Political leaders focus on strategic outcomes. Those are not always the same thing. A military operation may achieve tactical success while creating new diplomatic problems. Likewise, A diplomatic decision may reduce tensions while limiting military options. Balancing those competing priorities is one of the most difficult tasks any government faces. That challenge becomes even greater during periods of rapid escalation. Every statement matters. Every warning matters. Every public appearance matters. Markets watch, allies watch, adversaries watch, and the global media watches. Now here's a question many viewers are asking. Could this situation affect countries far from the Middle East? Absolutely. The modern economy is deeply interconnected. Disruptions to major shipping routes can influence energy prices, transportation costs, manufacturing expenses, and economic confidence. That's one reason global markets monitor the Strait of Hormuz so closely. A regional crisis can quickly become an international concern. That connection explains why governments far from the Gulf continue monitoring developments so carefully. Now let's examine another critical factor: deterrence. Deterrence is often misunderstood. Many people assume deterrence means preventing conflict entirely. In reality, deterrence is about influencing decisions. It is about convincing an opponent that certain actions will produce unacceptable consequences. Successful deterrence reduces risky behavior. Failed deterrence encourages it. That's why military signaling plays such a major role during crises. Deployments are messages. Exercises are messages. Patrols are messages. Public statements are messages. The objective is to shape decision-making before a larger conflict begins. And right now, both sides appear determined to communicate strength. That creates a highly sensitive environment. Now here's another question. What concerns analysts most? The answer is escalation without intention. History contains many examples of conflicts that expanded beyond what either side originally wanted. Small incidents became larger incidents. Larger incidents became regional crises. Regional crises became wars. No leader publicly wants that outcome. But avoiding it requires discipline, communication, and accurate information. When those elements weaken, risks increase. That's why diplomatic channels remain so important even during periods of military confrontation. Communication can reduce misunderstandings. Misunderstandings can reduce escalation. And reduced escalation can create opportunities for negotiation. Which brings us to another important question. Is diplomacy still possible? The answer appears to be yes. Despite increasing tensions, diplomatic efforts continue in various forms. Multiple governments remain interested in preventing a broader conflict. Regional stability remains a shared interest for many countries. The challenge is that diplomacy becomes harder as military pressure increases. Every new incident narrows available options. Every escalation increases political pressure. Every exchange creates additional obstacles. That's why timing matters so much. The longer a crisis continues, the harder it often becomes to resolve. Now let's discuss what military analysts will be watching next. They will monitor force movements. They will monitor regional deployments. They will monitor maritime activity. They will monitor air operations. And perhaps most importantly, they will monitor political decisions. Because political decisions ultimately determine whether a crisis expands or contracts. Military forces execute policy. Political leaders create policy. Understanding that relationship is essential for understanding any international crisis. Now here's the biggest question of all. Where does this go from here? There are several possibilities. The first possibility is de-escalation. Both sides could decide that the risks have become too great and pursue diplomatic solutions. The second possibility is limited confrontation. Military exchanges could continue while both sides avoid crossing certain thresholds. The third possibility is broader escalation. That outcome remains the most concerning because it introduces significant uncertainty. At this moment, no one can predict with certainty which path will emerge. What we do know is that the stakes are extremely high. The Strait of Hormuz remains strategically vital. Global markets remain sensitive. military forces remain alert, and political leaders continue making decisions that could shape events far beyond the Middle East. That is why this story matters. It is not simply about one region, it is about global stability. It is about energy security. It is about military deterrence. And it is about whether diplomacy can keep pace with rapidly changing events. The coming days may provide the answer, and until they do, the world will continue watching the Strait of Hormuz very closely. But there is another layer to this story that most headlines are missing, and it may be the most important layer of all. Because military conflicts are rarely decided by a single strike, a single deployment, or a single political statement. They are decided by momentum. And right now, the question every analyst is asking is this: who has the momentum? At first glance, many observers would argue that the United States holds the advantage. American naval assets remain active across the region. American intelligence capabilities continue monitoring developments around the clock. And American military commanders maintain the ability to respond rapidly to emerging threats. But is military capability the same thing as strategic momentum? Not necessarily. History is full of examples where the strongest military power struggled to achieve its political objectives. Why? Because military power and strategic success are not always the same thing. One wins battles, the other shapes outcomes. And that distinction matters enormously in the current situation. Now let me ask you a question. What is Iran actually trying to achieve? The answer may surprise some viewers. Many analysts believe Iran's objective is not necessarily to win a direct military confrontation. Instead, the goal may be to increase costs, create uncertainty, and demonstrate that regional stability cannot be achieved without considering Iranian interests. From that perspective, even limited disruptions can carry strategic value. Why? Because uncertainty itself becomes a weapon. When shipping companies become nervous, uncertainty works. When energy markets become nervous, uncertainty works. When governments begin discussing contingency plans, uncertainty works. This is why seemingly small incidents can generate global attention. The impact extends far beyond the immediate event itself. Now here's another important question. How are America's regional allies responding? The answer is carefully, very carefully. Regional governments understand the stakes. Many depend on stable shipping routes. Many depend on energy exports. Many depend on security partnerships. And all of them understand that a wider conflict would carry enormous economic consequences. As a result, governments across the region are balancing two priorities at the same time. They want security, and they want stability. Those goals sound similar, but during a crisis, they can become difficult to balance. Strong responses can strengthen security, but strong responses can also increase tensions. Diplomatic caution can reduce tensions, but excessive caution can be interpreted as weakness. Finding the right balance becomes one of the most difficult challenges leaders face. Now let's talk about another factor that rarely receives enough attention: the information war. Because modern conflicts are fought in multiple domains simultaneously. There is the military battlefield, there is the diplomatic battlefield, and there is the information battlefield. Narratives matter, perceptions matter, public opinion matters. Every government involved understands this reality. That is why official statements are carefully crafted. That is why military actions are often accompanied by political messaging. And that is why competing narratives emerge almost immediately after major events occur. Each side wants to influence how the situation is understood. Each side wants to shape international perception. And each side wants to strengthen its own position before the next phase begins. Now here's the question. Why does perception matter so much? Because perception influences decision-making. Leaders make decisions based on what they believe is happening. Markets react based on what investors believe is happening. Military commanders prepare based on what they believe may happen next. In other words, perception can influence reality. That makes information one of the most valuable strategic assets in any crisis. Now let's shift our focus to the economic dimension, because every major geopolitical crisis eventually reaches the economy. And when that happens, the effects can spread rapidly. Investors begin evaluating risks. Companies begin reviewing supply chains. Governments begin examining energy reserves. Financial institutions begin monitoring market volatility. All of these reactions occur before a single additional shot is fired. That's because markets dislike uncertainty, and few things create uncertainty faster than escalating geopolitical tensions near a critical shipping route. Now let me ask another question. Could this situation remain limited? Yes, it absolutely could. In fact, many crises throughout history have eventually stabilized after periods of heightened tension. But that outcome depends on choices, political choices, military choices, diplomatic choices. Every decision made in the coming days will influence which path becomes more likely. And that is exactly why analysts are watching developments so closely. Because the current situation sits at a crossroads. One road leads toward stabilization. Another road leads toward escalation. And the decisions made now may determine which direction events move next. Now let's discuss the military calculus. Military planners often think in terms of capabilities and intentions. Capabilities answer one question: what can an opponent do? Intentions answer a different question: what does the opponent want to do? Understanding both is essential. Capabilities without hostile intentions may not create immediate danger. Hostile intentions without capabilities may not create immediate danger either. But when both exist simultaneously, the strategic picture changes dramatically. That is why intelligence gathering remains so important. Commanders want to understand not only what assets are available, they want to understand how those assets might be used. That assessment influences everything from force deployments to operational planning. Now here's a question that many viewers may be wondering. What should we watch next? There are several indicators: military movements, diplomatic meetings, official statements, regional deployments, energy market reactions. Each provides clues about the direction of the crisis. None offer certainty, but together they help analysts build a clearer picture of what may happen next. And that brings us to the central question: what happens if neither side backs down? That scenario creates significant risks, not because conflict becomes inevitable, but because opportunities for miscalculation increase. The more assets operating in close proximity, the greater the chance of misunderstanding. The more pressure leaders face, the harder compromise becomes. And the longer tensions continue, the more difficult it becomes to restore trust. These dynamics explain why experienced diplomats often move quickly during crises. Time matters, momentum matters, and preventing escalation becomes more difficult with each passing day. As we look ahead, one reality stands out above all others. The situation remains fluid. Events are moving quickly, decisions are being made in real time, and the consequences of those decisions may extend far beyond the region itself. The world is watching. Military commanders are watching, markets are watching, and governments are watching. Because what happens next may determine whether this remains a period of tension or becomes something much larger. And that is why this story is far from over. In fact, many analysts believe the most important developments may still be ahead. The question now is not whether the world is paying attention. The question is whether the next move brings stability or pushes the region one step closer to a broader confrontation. That answer may arrive sooner than many people expect.